Hi, I'm John Ficarra. Welcome to Ficarra Classic, and today we're doing a road trip. We are down at Monterey Car Week, and in fact we're actually at Laguna Seca for the Monterey Motorsports reunion, or what we used to call the Monterey Historics. So I'm here with my friends at Pacific Throttle House, and they're going to let me show you a few of their cars. But there's all kinds of cars here today. Group 7 Can-Am cars, Trans Am cars. Over there, the old school pre-war cars are warming up. If you ever get a chance to come here and watch these races, watch these cars as they're supposed to be seen on a racetrack, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best things you can do is to come here for Monterey Car Week. But let's start by looking at what Pacific Throttle House here has to offer, and we're going to start with this, the Chevron B16 Spider. And I'm going to try to get into each of these cars. I'm 6'3", so I'm going to show you how small these cars are and the reason that I'm probably not a Formula One driver. This car is a 2-liter sports car. It was built in 1970. Chevron is a British chassis maker. They made race cars back in the day, all kinds of different types of race cars. I gotta squeeze my leg under the steering wheel. It's an aluminum monocoque. Now this car has a seat pad in it right now for the driver, Michael. He's much smaller than I am. That's why I don't fit inside. But you can see even my shoulders don't fit so well. But these were sports car, 2-liter sports cars back in 1970. This was driven by Brian Redman, the famous Brian Redman, who drove for Porsche. He drove just about everything and won. And he was driving this car originally as a coupe, which means it had a roof on it when it was originally built, and he originally raced it. But other cars like the Porsche 908 and a few other places, they started cutting the roofs off to make them faster. And he recommended to them to cut the roof off. So mid-season, they sliced the roof off and made it into what's called a Spider. And this Spider is the only one that exists. This is the only B16 Spider ever made. And it went on to win the championship that year. And also, then they sent it down to South Africa, where Brian Redman won the Springbok Championship as well in this car. So this is a championship-winning car. It's about 1,400 pounds. It has a BDG engine in it. Now that was originally a Ford motor, and companies like Cosworth would breathe on them, these two little 2-liters, and they get about this, in this form, it was about 290 horsepower. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of power until you look at the fact that this thing only weighs 1,400 pounds. Now that's pretty light. And this here at the Historics is racing originally. Earlier this week, it was racing in a class with BMW CSLs, GT40s, Porsche 908s, and it blazed by all of them. So they moved it up a class, and it's now running today with Porsche 935s, which are the Group 5 turbo cars, Greenwood Corvettes, big block Corvettes from back in the day, Decon Monzas, all kinds of monstrous machinery, and they're out there in this 1,400-pound car. It's going to be a great race. We'll see how it does. In the race yesterday, I think they came in third out of the whole field, which is pretty impressive. So I'm going to try to get out of this car as gracefully as I can, but it's not really easy to do. Be graceful getting out of a race car. All right. Now, and up. Other cool little things. This has center lock wheels on it. Now, not all cars back then ran. Some of them ran 5-spokes. It depended on what series you were in. But the center locks, of course, made it easy to change. But they're really not that big. These are tiny little wheels. Gives you the proportion. You can see my size of my hand. Gives you an idea how small these wheels are. He's got fresh rubber on here today, so it should go pretty well. All right, let's go over to the next car that they've got here, Pacific Throttle House. Pacific Throttle House is kind of a company that's very much like with the backbone of what run the Historics. And they're these companies that they will find you a race car, they will prep it for you, they will store it for you, they will bring it to the track, they will have the oil warmed up, and all you got to do is hop in and drive. And if you're a wealthy individual who can afford a car like the Chevron, that's about a $250,000 car, you show up, it's ready to go, you get your race on, and then you come back and they take care of you. But Pacific Throttle House is really nice. They're really a boutique shop that focus on very specific cars, and they're run by a friend of mine named Peter Ralphs. Now you might remember that name from my video on my Corona race car. Peter used to run motorsports department at Canapa. In fact, his dad was a race car mechanic, and he did race car mechanics for like Formula 3000, Formula 4, Formula Ford, Formula 1. I'm singing his praises, but it's amazing. Like touring cars, what else? Trans Am. It goes on and on. NASCAR trucks. These are the kind of people you want working on your vintage car, because Peter and his crew worked on these cars when they were new. And there's no parts available for them. They can actually fabricate it. So Peter was the one who helped me build the Corona's subframes when we put all the crazy stuff in my race car. One of the few people I would trust building a race car from scratch, fabricating it from scratch. So the next car they've got is this, the Coopster. Now, you might go, what the hell is a Coopster? There's no such thing as a Porsche Coupester. And you're right, there isn't. What it is in 1963, the second owner of this car was on the freeway or getting off the freeway and rolled it. And it was a coupe originally, and crushed the roof, crushed the doors, and he sold it to his mechanic cheap, and his mechanic said, I'm gonna take it racing. And he cut the roof off of it, fixed the door, made an SCCA race cage for it, and it became the Coopster. It's not a coupe, it's not a roadster, it's a Coopster. And it actually became a very successful car racing through the 70s. Its second racing owner, I believe, won E-Production, a championship in it before that driver moved on to IMSA. So this has some real great race history to it. And then a lot of race cars, this is kind of what happens, this is where they turn into vintage cars. They sit fallow for years. And so for the 80s, this car did absolutely nothing. And in 1989, a gentleman found it and said, wow, what a great old race car. And he turned it into a vintage racer. He took it back to kind of what it originally was. Now, they've taken it right back to what this kind of way it would have raced back in the day. So this is actually a drum brake car, and not racing drum brakes like Porsche street drum brakes. So it's a challenging car to drive. It has a little bit more room in it, so I can actually kind of get into this car, not too badly, but still. All right, this one I fit into a little bit better. I wouldn't mind trying to drive this. And it, again, drum brakes. It's got the 4-cylinder in the back, flat 4. It's a 1600 cc engine. When the engine was fresh, it was probably about 130 horsepower, but right now they tell me it's probably around 100. But the real challenge in driving a car like this is these brakes, is that you have to carry a lot of speed through the corners. And if you watch Michael drive this, he just sends it through the corners. He just gives up with the braking because drum brakes only last so long. But it's a nice, tiny little car. If you can see from all the different stickers, this thing is raced in every vintage race and does well and has been doing so for so many years. This kind of a car is the backbone of vintage racing. And not a terribly hard car to buy, own, and drive and afford to keep up. The parts are readily available. So that's the little Coopster. And speaking of little, I'll move this out of the way so you can see the Ginetta. This is a Ginetta G4R. Now, you can tell by me standing next to it, this car is tiny. And I'm gonna try to get into it. If I can figure out how to open the door. Let's see, there we go. The steering wheel comes off. But come up close and you can see me try to squeeze into it. It's not gonna happen. I'll probably get one leg into it. Now this is a little tube frame car. You don't really drive the car, you kind of wear it. Yeah, not gonna happen. You imagine me with a helmet on, right? It would be absolutely ridiculous. Now the Ginettas were known as the giant killers. It's a tiny little car. It weighs 1,100 pounds. It's got a Lotus twin cam in it. And that engine probably puts out about 150 horsepower, but with 1,100 pounds, it really hustles. And back in the day, this car would have gone up against Ferrari 250 LMs, Shelby Cobras, and now they didn't always beat them, but occasionally they would. Can you imagine this little car built in Britain in a shed, essentially? Ginetta built these cars in little street car, kit cars you could buy in a cottage industry in England, would go up against these monstrously supported big engine, high horsepower cars, and they would just squirt by them. These are really so entertaining to watch. They're really entertaining to drive because it's a very narrow car. It's a very short wheelbase. They're nervous, but you know, it's kind of like really it's a go-kart. I mean, if you think about it, a fully loaded bagger Harley Davidson probably weighs as much as this little car does. And now this is a legit Ginetta. They only built, this is the R, the G4R, they only built 12 of these. And this one has been made sure that it is one of the original cars. But it's super tiny, it's super cute. And Pacific Throttle House basically has been supporting these cars through the prehistorics and through the historics, and have kept them all racing, and they've all done marvelously. So that's it. Just a quick visit to the pits at Pacific Throttle House. I thank them for letting me sit in and play with their cars, and for them hosting me and feeding me today. If you get a chance to come down to the historic races ever, or to Monterey Car Week, or any of the events here, I highly recommend it. It's really the only way to enjoy these cars, the way they're meant to be seen, racing, and in the element, up close. You can walk, it's not a museum, you can walk right up and touch these cars. They're fantastic, and it's a fantastic event. And I'll put Pacific Throttle House's YouTube channel and their website in the description below if you want to visit them. If you have a classic vintage race car, historic race car, I highly recommend reaching out to them. They're located really close to Laguna Seca, so they're great for supporting your car right close to one of the greatest tracks in the world. So that's it. I appreciate you watching. I'll get some more videos up for you soon. Have a great day.